The camera was already rolling when the young journalist adjusted the mic on his jacket, the late afternoon sun painting soft golden lines on the empty park bench beside him. He had been tasked with filming a local interest segment, Everyday Stories, they called it, meant to be human, light, perhaps even funny, the kind of thing that aired between weather forecasts and sports updates. He looked around for someone willing to talk. Most people avoided his eye or walked faster, clutching coffee cups and grocery bags. And then he saw him, an older man sitting alone on the far bench, hands folded over a cane, a wool cap pulled low, and a gaze fixed on something in the distance. There was something quiet about him, but not in a sad way. More like a statue, solid, unmoved. The journalist approached carefully. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "Would you mind answering a few questions for a local segment we're doing? Just a few words about your life, your thoughts, anything at all." The man didn't respond at first, just looked at him slowly. His eyes were pale blue, distant but alert. After a moment, he nodded. The journalist sat beside him, cueing the cameraman. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping it simple. "Jack," the man replied. "Jack Miller." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Miller. What do you do these days?" The old man gave a shrug. "I walk, I sit, I watch." The journalist smiled politely, sensing a challenge. "Did you used to work?" "I did," Jack said. "What kind of work?" There was a pause. "Military," he said finally. The journalist perked up slightly. "Oh, thank you for your service. When did you serve?" Jack hesitated. "Long time ago. In the war." "Which one, if you don't mind me asking?" "Vietnam," Jack said, his voice steady. "Infantry. First Recon Dot." The journalist blinked. That wasn't something he heard often. "Wow. I can't imagine what that must have been like." Jack looked at him again, this time a little longer. "No," he said quietly. "You can't." There was a silence, but not an uncomfortable one. The journalist leaned forward. "Would you be willing to tell me more? What was it like, coming home?" Jack exhaled slowly. "It was confusing, loud in my head, quiet outside. People didn't understand, didn't want to." The journalist nodded slowly. "Did you keep in touch with anyone you served with?" Jack's hands tightened on his cane. "Most of them didn't make it home," he said. "The ones that did, we stopped talking. Easier that way." The camera captured the stillness in his face. The journalist's tone softened. "Is there a moment from those days you still remember clearly?" Jack didn't answer for a long time. The journalist thought he might have said too much, pressed too far. But then Jack spoke. "We were ambushed in the jungle. Lost half the unit in the first few minutes. I don't remember the noise anymore. Just the silence after. The kind that crawls into your bones. I pulled 20 of them out that day." The journalist blinked, not sure he had heard right. 20? Jack nodded. "Some were injured, some were frozen. I didn't think. Just moved. Fire everywhere. I carried them, dragged them, one by one." The journalist swallowed. That's incredible." Jack shook his head. "It was survival, not heroism. I didn't get a medal, didn't want one. I came home and got a job packing boxes in a warehouse." The journalist looked stunned. "And you never told anyone?" "What for?" Jack said. "Who'd believe me? Besides, some of them didn't make it even after I pulled them out. And the ones that did, they didn't look at me like a hero. They looked at me like a reminder of what they lost." The camera kept rolling, capturing every word, every crease in Jack's weathered face. The journalist sat in silence for a few moments, trying to find the right words. "Would you mind if we aired this? I think people should hear your story." Jack gave a slow shrug. "It's your camera. It's your story," the journalist replied. Jack said nothing, just looked ahead at the pond, shimmering in the sunlight. "You know," he said finally, "I used to dream about them. The ones I carried. I could feel their weight even in sleep. Now I just sit here and hope maybe someone remembers." The journalist's throat tightened. "They will now," he said. Jack turned and looked at him. "Do you think that matters?" "Yes," the journalist said firmly. "I do." Jack nodded once. "Then tell it true. Don't add drama. Don't call me a hero. Just say I was there, and I did what I had to. The journalist promised. And the camera kept rolling, capturing the quiet courage of a man who had held the weight of 20 lives and asked for nothing in return. 3 days had passed since the video aired. At first, it had been just another clip uploaded to the station's website, scheduled to air between stories about a local food truck festival and a high school baseball game. But something happened. Maybe it was the stillness in Jack's voice, the weight of his silence, or the way his eyes seemed to carry decades of unspoken memory. Whatever it was, the story took off. It started with a few shares on social media. Then a local veterans group reposted it with the caption, "We know men like Jack. You just don't usually hear their voices." Within 24 hours, the clip had hundreds of thousands of views. Comments poured in, some from fellow veterans who recognized the quiet pain in Jack's story, others from young people who had never heard someone speak about war with such raw, undecorated honesty. The journalist, whose name was Kyle, couldn't believe what was happening. He had done interviews before, light stories, puff pieces, but nothing like this. Emails flooded in from news outlets, veteran organizations, even a major documentary producer. But Jack didn't know any of this yet. He didn't own a computer or a smartphone. He still paid for things with cash and read the newspaper front to back every morning. Kyle felt strange about it, like he was carrying a secret too big to hold alone. On the fourth day, he went back to the park. Jack was there as if he hadn't moved. Same bench, same cane, same cap. Only now, people walked by and glanced at him longer. One woman smiled. A boy tugged at his father's sleeve and pointed. Jack noticed, but said nothing. Kyle approached carefully. "Hey, Jack." The old man looked up. "You again. Thought I'd stop by. You got a minute?" "All I got is minutes," Jack said. Kyle sat. "Did you know your interview's been seen by over 2 million people?" Jack squinted. "What interview?" "Ours, from the other day. It's everywhere. People are talking about you, your story." Jack was quiet. "What are they saying?" Kyle opened his phone and read a few comments, words like hero, inspiration, thank you for your service, and even messages from people saying they'd shown the clip in classrooms. Jack shook his head and didn't want that. "I know," Kyle said gently, "but maybe they needed to hear it." Jack sat in silence for a long time. "I didn't tell you that story for attention." "You didn't. That's why it mattered." Jack looked out at the pond again. "People don't usually care. Not about the ones who make it back." Kyle shifted. "There's more. A group from Washington reached out. They want to honor you. Something about a delayed medal review. Said they looked into unit reports and you should have been recognized years ago." Jack's jaw tensed. "I told you, I don't want a medal." "I know, but they say it's not about you anymore. It's about setting the record straight." For history, Jack didn't respond. "You could say no," Kyle added. "No pressure." Jack exhaled. "Let me think about it." Kyle nodded. "Of course." They sat in silence for a while. A breeze passed through the park. A woman stopped and handed Jack a folded note. "Thank you," she said softly, then walked away. Jack looked down at the paper. It said, "You made me understand my father. He never talked about it either. Thank you." He read it twice, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket. "Funny," Jack said, almost to himself. "I didn't say much, just told the truth." "That's more than most," Kyle replied. "There's something else," Jack said after a pause. "Something I didn't say before." Kyle looked at him. Jack's hands tightened around the cane. There was a boy, young, maybe 18, first time in country. Fresh boots, clean eyes. He was part of our squad that day. Got hit. Bad. Jack's voice wavered slightly. "I carried him. But he died before the chopper came. I told myself I'd write his mother. I never did." Kyle waited, the weight of the moment settling between them. "I remembered his name yesterday," Jack said. "Been 40 years, and it came back like a whisper." "Do you want to find her?" Kyle asked. Jack nodded. "Yeah, I think I need to." Kyle smiled. "We can try." For the first time, Jack looked younger. Not in body, but in something else. something behind his eyes. You ever think about what you leave behind? He asked. Kyle nodded slowly. I do now. Jack smiled faintly. You're a good kid. Keep listening. They sat a while longer, strangers no more. The world around them didn't stop. Cars passed, birds sang, dogs barked in the distance, but something had shifted. For Jack Miller, the war wasn't over, but the silence had been broken. And for Kyle, a story meant to fill airtime had become something more, something lasting, a truth spoken finally, heard, and the world somehow had listened. The wind was colder than usual the morning Jack stepped out of the cab and stood in front of the marble building. His coat was buttoned to the top, his cane steadied his steps, and a folded piece of paper rested in his inner pocket, a name he'd carried in his mind for decades, and only just spoken aloud. Kyle walked beside him, quiet but present, dressed in a suit that looked a size too big. They hadn't spoken much during the ride. There hadn't been a need. Everything had changed after that second conversation in the park. Kyle had used his connections at the station to track down a military historian who then helped locate the family of Private Thomas Bell, the 18-year-old boy Jack had carried through the jungle, the one he thought he'd never remember. They found his mother. She was alive, living in a small town 2 states away, widowed, alone, and still sleeping with her son's folded uniform tucked in a drawer by her bed. When Kyle called, she didn't cry. She just whispered, "It's been a long time since someone remembered his name." She agreed to meet Jack. The ceremony came later. Once the Pentagon reviewed the footage and corroborated Jack's actions from the archived reports and radio transcripts, they determined that Jack Miller had saved over a dozen men in a single operation under fire, an act long buried under the fog of war and the silence of its survivors. They offered him the Distinguished Service Cross. Jack didn't say yes. He didn't say no either. He just showed up today. Coat button, face unreadable. Inside, people were waiting. Not a crowd. Jack had made it clear he didn't want anything showy, but a modest gathering of veterans, officers, 2 local congressmen, and Thomas Bell's mother. She was small and thin, but stood tall when Jack approached her. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. Then, Jack took off his cap. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm sorry it took so long." She smiled gently, a hand to her chest. "He would have been proud to be carried by you." Jack looked down, trying to contain whatever threatened to rise in his throat. "I should have written." "You're here now," she said, and that was enough. The ceremony began. Words were said, a citation read aloud, stories spoken by people who hadn't even been there but had pieced together what Jack had done. Jack stood silently as they pinned the medal to his coat. When asked if he wanted to speak, he shook his head, then paused, then stepped forward anyway. "I don't need to say much," he began. "I didn't come here for a medal. I came because I remember the ones who didn't come back. I remember their voices, their jokes, their fear, their courage. I carried their weight then. I carry it now." The room was silent. "This," he said, touching the medal, "this is for them. I just held the line long enough for someone to notice." When he stepped down, the applause was quiet but sincere. Later, in a quiet corner, Jack handed Kyle the folded paper. "Keep it," he said. "You're the reason any of this happened." Kyle looked at him. "You sure?" Jack nodded. "I've got what I need." Outside, the air was crisp. Jack walked a little slower now. Not from age, but from something else. Something unburdened. As they neared the curb, he turned to Kyle. "You know, I used to think being remembered didn't matter. That it was better to disappear than to be misunderstood." "And now?" Kyle asked. Jack looked at the sky. "Now I think maybe we all want someone to remember we were here, that we mattered." "You do," Kyle said. "You always did." Jack gave a small smile. "Then let's go home." And they did. No headlines, no parade, just a quiet ride back through the city, a veteran and the young man who had listened, proof that sometimes all it takes is one conversation to pull a memory from the shadows and remind the world what courage really looks like.